This is a Storm Track 12 special, Tracking the Tropics, the 2022 hurricane season. Sponsored by Generator Supercenter, SFI Insurance, and HRH Roofing.
Hurricanes are something we live with here in eastern North Carolina. And the 2022 hurricane season is here, and now is the time to make sure that you're prepared before the next storm heads our way. I'm Storm Track 12 Chief Meteorologist Donnie Cox. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Storm Track 12 Meteorologist Les Still. And according to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, we're headed for what will potentially be another above average season as far as hurricanes are concerned. Now, this is coming off of last year's storm total where we saw 21 storms, and unfortunately for the second year in a row, we ran through the designated name list. Let's hope we don't do that again this year.
And you can see this is the Colorado state. This actually came out in the spring, and even the prediction here is above normal. But again, this is just a pattern that we've gotten used to. But you can see that hurricanes, 9 possible out of the named storms, and 4 major hurricanes, which by the way is category 3 or higher. But Les, this is the one that was just released from NOAA.
Yeah, they were kind of in that same boat there, where all the indications that we're looking at, whether it's sea surface temperatures, weather patterns in the Pacific and the Atlantic, all showing that potential of above normal numbers for us here. Now, again, keep in mind, you can play the number game all you want. If it's out in the middle of the ocean, it's not that big of a deal. Hurricane Andrew in '92 was only one storm that made landfall, but tore up South Florida. So now's the time to start preparing. And
that's why we always say it only takes one storm.
That's
because if it's one storm and it's devastating, then we know at that particular point that that is what we're going to deal with. Even if you have 25 storms, just one makes a difference.
That's one that makes a difference there. And again, it's kind of the things we're looking at, whether it's the El Nino or La Nina, sea surface temperatures, all that indicating that potential higher than normal year in store for us this year. Well, like we said, now is the time for yourself and your family to prepare what does happen when the storm potentially comes our way. Are you ready? The first thing you should do is have a plan of evacuate. And should one be ordered, you need to know what zone you are in. So let's kind of break these zones down for you here. Mainly, we're talking about east of Highway 17. Zone A is the areas you see there in red, down East Carteret County, eastern Pamlico County, on up to Beaufort County and Terrell County. Zone B, now you start to get more of Hyde County included in there, Jones County as well. But you'll notice even up in towards the Greenville area, we're in that low Zone B category there. That's because of the Tar River. Category Zone C is where you start getting the majority of Craven County away from the Neuse River, and the final 2 stages will take us Zone D and Zone E. So again, now is the time to know what your zone is, and if you need to know if an evacuation is ordered, that go to our website, WCTI12.com, and follow the hurricane link to the North Carolina Emergency Management page. There you can put in your address down to the street level and find out exactly what zone you are in. The next question, though, is what route you should take should an evacuation be ordered. Those are marked and will take you westward towards I-95. Now is the time to check that evacuation route so that is closest to you, so that you know which way to go should an evacuation be ordered. One of the main evacuation routes is Highway 70, running from Morehead City through New Bern west.
This year, Highway 70 is undergoing a major upgrade between Havelock and New Bern. Meteorologist Rachel Myers checked in with NCDOT to see how the construction project will affect those evacuation plans.
Driving on Highway 70, it's clear construction in James City and Havelock is ramping up.
The daytime operations will be building the new service roads and working on some of the side roads in that area.
Highway 70 is a major hurricane evacuation route and connects thousands on the coast to I-95. NCDOT construction engineer Cadmus Capehart says crews at construction sites will begin to prep for a storm days before it hits.
The first things we want to do is start securing our site. So contractors will start securing their equipment, their materials, and things that could easily be blown around.
NCDOT encourages everyone to use the designated evacuation routes like Highway 70 instead of back roads, because that's where law enforcement is typically positioned before a hurricane. Capehart says when a hurricane is forecasted to hit eastern North Carolina, construction will stop and all lanes will be open along Highway 70 for faster evacuation.
what we would do is suspend the operations that would require lane closures. It would be our goal for us not to be a hindrance to people who are trying to leave the coast.
Again, we have a link on our hurricane page at WCTI12.com that will take you to the North Carolina Emergency Management page, where you can get all of the information you need to evacuate safely should the need arise.
Well, the U.S. Coast Guard is always monitoring any storm that comes our way, and they're ready to rescue or aid to anyone who gets in trouble on the water because of a storm. I got a chance to take a look and see how they train every day to be ready when conditions are at their worst. When the search and rescue alarm is activated at the Fort Macon boat station, crewmen head to their boats.
The preservation of human life is always our primary focus, and that doesn't change when there's a tropical storm or a hurricane threatening our coast.
Commanding Officer Schultz stresses being able to safely handle situations that arise when a storm threatens our coast comes from the constant training in every kind of weather.
We train 365 days a year. Coast Guard Station Fort Macon's designated heavy weather station, so we've got coxswains or boat operators that are highly proficient in operating up to 50-knot winds, 20-foot seas. Our motor lifeboats are very capable assets. We're working with port partners to come up with scenarios to think about the worst case scenario.
But depending on the severity of the storm, it may be unsafe to launch the boats for a rescue.
If we're in tropical storm or hurricane force winds, those storm conditions exceed the limitations of our assets. So there is a chance that in the middle of a storm, we may not be able to go.
Lieutenant Commander Mark Allen is the Chief of Emergency Management and Force Readiness for the Coast Guard sector here in North Carolina. He says checklists are a vital tool to be able to handle situations that can arise during a storm on our coast.
We have kind of an internal checklist, that we work to prepare our crews and our assets, our buildings, our infrastructure, to make sure that we're ready, we can respond, as close to the storm's arrival as possible, and then to make sure that we're able to reconstitute and get back out there as soon as it's safe to do so. We work those internal checklists, and then on the other side, we also work through, checklists to close the port in some cases, if the track and intensity of the storm is such that, we might need to, the captain of the port would need to close the waterways or the port.
Communication between the Coast Guard and other agencies is key when it comes to dealing with impactful storms.
Prior to the storm's arrival, we send liaison officers to Raleigh to work at the state emergency operations center. We send liaisons to our county and different state locations, and we plant our people throughout the coastal communities.
Lieutenant Commander Allen explains this approach not only makes communication easier, but helps them understand what the specific needs are for those local communities. And with the size of the Coast Guard, there's always willingness to help. In 2018, with Hurricane Florence, the Coast Guard pre-positioned small inland search and rescue teams that came from the middle of the United States to assist with rescues here in eastern North Carolina.
Another big concern with a hurricane is power. Power companies are constantly reviewing what happened with past storms to better prepare for the next one. Before the storm, Carteret-Craven cooperative crews are scheduled and have a storm plan in place. Melissa Glenn of the co-op says Hurricane Florence in 2018 left all of the service area without power, but they updated their storm plan and now they have stock supplies on hand and prepared to respond immediately following a storm.
Storm stock, we have lots of transformers, line, fuses, anything that we might need to replace after a hurricane. Any changes that we need to make from lessons learned in the years past, we address that. Any sort of staffing needs that we need to, look at and move people around as far as what folks are going to be doing the day of or the days after.
Glenn tells us tree limbs falling causes most of the outages from the storms, and once the storm passes, crews and survey crews hit the areas and begin to work on what they need to bring back power to most of the people. Coming up a little later in this half hour, learning what past storms do to make us building safer codes, meaning that homes built in North Carolina have certain criteria. We'll show you what you need to know before the storm hits.
You're watching a Storm Track 12 special, Tracking the Tropics, sponsored by Generator Supercenter, SFI Insurance, and HRH Roofing.
The 2022 hurricane season storm names that you see on your screen are set and prepared for this year. Do want to point out that Alex that you see, the last time we saw Alex, it was a rare January hurricane. So kind of an interesting fact that as we start this next hurricane season, Alex is a name, but it's holding off until hurricane season starts. First responders like fire, police, and EMS are always on the front lines of these storms too.
That's right. News Channel 12's Megan Scarano went to Atlantic Beach to show us how they've upgraded their facility to better serve the island community.
While giving me a tour of the new Public Safety Administration building.
We'll take you right into our main building.
Atlantic Beach Fire Chief Michael Simpson shows me the new Emergency Operations Center, which he says will be critical for first responders during an emergency, like a hurricane.
Whether it's localized flooding, whether it's numerous down power lines, trees blocking the road. We can coordinate all those things here in one place and then dispatch out the proper resources.
Simpson says the new building was designed to best serve the people of Atlantic Beach. It's built to withstand hurricane-force winds and elevated to prevent flooding.
What do we deal with in Atlantic Beach? And we deal with water rescues, we deal with tourism, and we deal with hurricanes and storms.
Simpson says as hurricane season approaches, he's using this time to prepare.
In that same sense, we think ahead a little bit. We're getting out equipment, dry suits, wet suits, flotation devices. This is time we get summer service done on the boat, make sure everything's good to go and ready to respond in any emergency.
And it's not just about double checking equipment. For Simpson and his crews, it's making sure everyone's trained, especially on water rescues.
Sometimes that means working on swimming skills. Sometimes it means utilizing small watercraft or rowboats, small inflatable boats.
And while first responders are taking the calm before the storm to get ready, Simpson says people at home should too.
You can't wait to prepare until the last minute. You've got to have your supplies, you've got to have your basics secured, and you've got to have a plan of if things do get bad, where are you going to go?
That was Megan Scarano with the story from Carteret County. Chief Simpson says during the storm they have all hands on deck, which is about anywhere between 16 to 20 employees, and now they have enough beds for everyone to sleep in during an emergency situation like the hurricane.
Still ahead, how prepared is your home to withstanding a landfalling hurricane? We investigate the building codes in North Carolina when Tracking the Tropics returns.
You're watching a Storm Track 12 special, Tracking the Tropics, sponsored by Generator Supercenter, SFI Insurance, and HRH Roofing.
Hurricane season is always an anxious time for people living along the coast, and damage from driving rain and gusty winds can be devastating.
That's right. In a News Channel 12 investigation, Frank Faboni learned more what could be done by state and local leaders to protect coastal homes from a hurricane.
Most homes are often no match for hurricane-force winds, but we've learned North Carolina could do more to make homes hurricane resilient by requiring better building methods. Methods tested and developed in this sophisticated lab in Richburg, South Carolina. Here, engineers at IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, use these massive fans to recreate the effects of a hurricane.
We've done, over a decade of research to figure out what works.
Dr. Ann Cope is the lab's chief engineer. She says what works is what they call a fortified roof. Watch what happens when they test a standard roof on the blue side of the duplex on the left against a fortified roof on the green side on the right.
The trace that was run through the test chamber that we were simulating, that was a Hurricane Florence event.
After hours of 105-mile-an-hour wind gusts and 8 inches per hour of rain, inside the duplex, the fortified home on the right is untouched, while the standard construction on the left is severely damaged.
The building code is always going to be the minimum standard for safe buildings.
Some states go beyond the minimum building code, adopting more stringent regulations in hurricane-prone areas. The IBHS ranks the 18 Atlantic and Gulf Coast states vulnerable to hurricanes on the strength of their building codes and enforcement. Florida, Virginia, and South Carolina came out on top in this year's review, with Florida adopting the equivalent of fortified construction codes. North Carolina comes in at 7th on their list.
We're not up to the requirements of what Florida has in some of its coastal areas, but it is a changing issue.
Code adoption in the United States is not a nationwide thing. Each state and then each local jurisdiction can make choices.
Dr. Cope says North Carolina is beginning to come around, launching a fortified roof grant program in 2017 that pays $6,000 to homeowners who agree to install a fortified roof.
North Carolina has gotten our most improved this past year.
To date, roughly 3,000 fortified roofs have now been installed under the grant program in North Carolina's coastal areas. Causey says mandating tougher building codes would increase costs for homeowners and businesses, while the grant program allows the state to target areas that need the fortification at a lower cost.
We're getting there. I mean, we're with this program, like the Fortified Roof Grant Program.
A program he believes is helping to lower insurance losses and hold down insurance rates.
It means the difference between the roof staying on the house and the roof being blown off and everything soaked in water. It's been a resounding success. We'd like to expand that.
Well, North Carolina is now working towards increasing that grant amount up to $10,000 to encourage more people to install a fortified roof. You can learn more about that pilot program on our website, WCTI12.com.
To prepare for a landfalling tropical cyclone, you need to have the supplies to get you through the storm and the long aftermath. Meteorologist Rachel Myers shows you what is needed for a good, well-stocked hurricane kit.
The first step is to grab a large container or bin like this one that's watertight. This will help protect these essential items from the elements in the case of an emergency. The next step is going to be putting in the most critical items first. Your top priority should be your water supply. You want a gallon a day for each member of your family for at least a week. Next, non-perishable food, things like canned soups, canned tuna, peanut butter, or even beef jerky. Your hurricane kit should be replenished and checked for spoiled food or water every 6 months. You may not have access to a television or to your cell phone. We recommend a NOAA weather radio so that you always have access to the most up-to-date information on the storm. We also recommend having a crank or solar-powered USB charger to charge all of those devices that may run out of battery during the storm. Have a stash of extra batteries on hand to replenish your NOAA weather radio and your flashlights. Hand sanitizer, wipes, feminine hygiene products, along with diapers, books, or toys to keep children entertained. A change of clothes, a fire extinguisher, or a blanket, all of these items could be useful in your hurricane kit.
You can find a checklist to help build your own hurricane kit on the hurricane page of WCTI12.com.
When a storm comes, it's vital to know where you can take shelter if needed. For the last 2 years, the Red Cross has been putting people who need evacuation into hotels because of the pandemic. But this year, they are returning to a little bit more normalcy and partnering with counties once again to open emergency shelters. James Jarvis with the American Red Cross says social distancing and masks will still be required in these shelters. But here are some things he says not to forget when planning to stay in one if needed.
It's a good idea to make sure that you have your important documents with you, so that way, if something were to happen to your home, those irreplaceable or very difficult to replace documents, you have those with you. Make sure you have your medications, at least a week's supply of your medications.
And most importantly, if you have a pet, he says you will need to have a copy of their vaccination records to be in that shelter. If you do not have a mask, Jarvis says they will be able to supply one at the shelter. We'll be right back.
You're watching a Storm Track 12 special, Tracking the Tropics, sponsored by Generator Supercenter, SFI Insurance, and HRH Roofing.
During the hurricane season, make sure you have several ways to get alerts. One of those, the NOAA Weather Radio. We talk a lot about the weather radio. It is instantaneous. When the Weather Service actually issues a warning, it goes immediately to this, and you see the crawl at the bottom of the TV screen. So we get all of this at the same time, but you need to have multiple ways.
That's right. And one handy tool to have is our Storm Track 12 mobile app for you. You're going to be wanting to have it your cell phone anyway, so make sure you have a little charger to be able to charge it up multiple times during the storm. But you get your weather alerts on there immediately. You can also check our Facebook and social media accounts, as we will be updating those as well during the storm.
Need to always be prepared. And of course, we're always here to alert you to severe weather danger. And we appreciate you joining us for this special presentation as we get ready for the hurricane season.